Happy weekend, y'all. Are you ready for October? This is the best time of year for sports and even weather and food. Thanksgiving on its way, so is Halloween. So are the cool nights. At least here in South Florida, I know up in the north it'll get pretty cold. I don't miss that. I don't know about you. I know you used to live up north. The cold is not where you want to be.
Hate the cold.
But anyway, what a crazy weekend for the NFL with every team doing something different for the national anthem. Look at the Steelers. The Steelers tried to avoid everything, and they're the biggest story of the weekend. So crazy. There were tons of upsets, very close games, and much, much more. It was one hell of a weekend for the sports books and Vegas. Remember to follow us on iTunes, Facebook, Android app, and YouTube at Between the Hashmarks, and email us any questions at bthashmarks@gmail.com if you'd like your question answered on the show. Without any further ado, I'd like to start today with my opening rant.
Your number one source for sports.
You know who I can't stand? Kevin Durant.
He looks like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton had a kid.
Now, who can argue with that?
I hate Boston.
I'm the biggest Miami Heat hater you'll ever meet.
I just don't understand where you're getting your bogus information from.
What the hell are you even talking about?
Well, I'm sorry you're too freaking sensitive to handle the truth.
You think I'm crazy? I'm just getting warmed up.
You're now Between the Hashmarks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe.
Do I think the NFL should be in London full-time? Hell to the no. This is an awful idea that is only on the table because of the money the NFL could make. Yes, it would be cool to live in London, play for the first NFL's franchise outside the United States, but would it be worth it? I don't think so. Think about all the travel miles that one team would have. That is an 11-hour flight from Miami, as I personally just took that flight last year. Imagine having to play the Seahawks. That would be almost 20 hours of flying just one way for one game. There's a reason teams usually, which is the key word there, have a bye following a London game. Traveling back and forth 8 times, including practice time, film room, everything that goes along with being a professional football player, it would be too much. The one way around that, the London team can go stateside, play 4 away games, then come back, play 4 home games, and then do that again to complete the season. So you only have to travel to the States twice. But then you are away from your family for a whole month, going hotel to hotel and city to city. Who wants to do that? Teams on the West Coast already struggle to come east and play at a 1 p.m. start time. How will the time difference mess with a team from London? I just don't see many positives in bringing football to London full time. I think it will fail miserably, as I don't see players wanting to sign there or re-sign there. A couple games a year is just enough for the British lads to get their American football fix and keep all the teams home base here in the States. What do you think about that?
James, you are absolutely correct that the NFL should not move a full-time team to England. 100% correct. And anyone who thinks the NFL should have a full-time team there doesn't really understand why this would be such a huge issue. But this seems to be something that will happen eventually, and it seems to be inevitable. There are already talks of this happening for the 2021 or the 2022 regular season. But for those of you who are saying that the NFL should stop going to England for a couple of games every year, that is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. There are many reasons to show you that the World Showcase that the NFL puts on 2 or 3 times a year is great for the game. Number 1, just about every game is sold out. Every game is in the 70,000s and low 80,000s of attendance. They are establishing a real fan base that loves this sport so much that they actually want their own team, even though it wouldn't be good for them. The competition level is also very, very good. Out of the 19 games that we've had in England, 9 of them have been within 1 score. Now you're saying to me, 9 out of 19, that's not a great percentage at all. Well, if you just look at last week, week 3 in the 2017 NFL season, it's considered one of the best weekends in NFL history, with all these close games, all these crazy upsets, and only 8 of those 16 games were within 1 score, if you include Thursday night's game. The money is soaring in the NFL for these London games. Absolutely soaring. They're making millions and millions of dollars on this. they need to continue doing this because it is great for expanding the game. And the flight is long, but New York to London is essentially the same thing as New York to Los Angeles. Now, having a team there for an entire season would be bad for teams going from back and forth, absolutely devastating. But 1 week a season for one team, completely fine. The main problem with putting a team there isn't just the logistical aspect of it, which is a huge problem in itself, but that it would not be the same as teams simply visiting there. The team that London would get would be a struggling team that we currently have now, or an expansion team. And those expansion teams take years for them to be good. Just look at the teams that are expansion teams lately. Houston, it took them 8 years to have a winning record, 10 years to make the playoffs. Jacksonville, yes, they had success making a championship game very quickly, but they have been largely irrelevant for the past 10 years or so. In Carolina, who they've only been to 2 Super Bowls. Other than that, they have not had really any success at all. But because it is the NFL's mission to expand this game and to continue being a global entity, it is inevitable that there will be a team in London. But really what needs to happen is, if they love football so much, American football so much, that they need to just create their own league. We have our own league for soccer. You don't see us taking our soccer teams and trying to put them in the English Premier League. That would be absolutely insane. They would get demolished. What England needs to do is form its own league, which I think they have a couple of, but their own professional league at the same level of the NFL or just below the same level of the NFL. And that league will submit to the NFL just like the MLS submits to the English Premier League.
Something that I want to add to that is, in soccer, they will take a team from the English Premier League to play the MLS All-Star team.
Exactly.
And that is something that the NFL could do, and they could take the Patriots, or they can take the Chargers, or any team from the NFL and have them play the All-Star team in London.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of base on where the talent level is.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good idea, and you could do that during the off season, as it wouldn't be this crazy game that you see, but it would be an exhibition, and I think
it could turn into the Pro Bowl.
Exactly. Would be great. Changing gears here, we have a new segment for you that we're going to try to do about once a month, where I was right, where I was wrong. Starting off, where I was wrong. These San Diego Chargers, oh man, I had them making the playoffs as a wild card team, and who knows, they could still make it, but this team could be 2-1 right now. They could be 2-1, but a couple of botched kicks and a Kansas City blowout, and they're sitting at 0-3 with a Philly team coming to town, staring at 0-4 right down the barrel. And you know what? I still don't understand what is so wrong with this team. Their D-line is great. Their offensive line is good. They still have Rivers and Gordon and the weapons that stretch the field. I don't understand why the Chargers are 0-3, and I cannot believe I was wrong here, but I absolutely was. James, where were you wrong?
I'd like to say that this is part of my rights, but it's not, because I did predict the Chargers to have a miserable season but lose a lot of close games, which they have thus far. But where I was wrong is this week. JJ Nelson, I told everybody to go pick him up, put him on your fantasy team, and insert him into your roster. Well, I hope you didn't listen to me in that aspect, because he was a bust this week after having a breakout week the week before. I picked him up in my Draftkings, and he just didn't perform. He literally put up a donut for me. He dropped a couple of passes. Larry Fitz looked like the stud we know him to be. And even with all the injuries to the Cardinals' offense at the moment, I no longer trust Nelson to provide big points week in and week out. Yes, he's got speed. Yes, he can stretch the field. But you have no playmakers on that team, and everybody counted Larry Fitz out. And this was your week to shine, and you put up a donut.
He's back.
It's unexcusable.
Yeah.
JJ Nelson, I know I just said that he was a pickup of the week, but now he's going to be your drop of the week. Make sure you drop him. Where were you right?
Where I was right. Oh, yes, this is great. The New York Football Giants are massively underperforming. and I predicted that at the beginning of the year. Now look, it's still very early. They could easily, well not easily, but they could go 13-3 the rest of the way, but I highly doubt it. The main reason for my mindset of being that they will not be as successful as everybody was thinking is because their offensive line is absolutely terrible. I had major problems with their offensive line at the beginning of the year, and they really only had these flashy signings like Brandon Marshall at the beginning of the year, which made people fall in love with this team and picked them. Many people predicted them as Super Bowl contenders. But this offensive line is absolutely atrocious. It's not giving Eli any protection, and Eli is absolutely awful when he has protection, never mind when he doesn't have it. Eli cannot throw the ball to anybody besides Odell, and they have absolutely no running game. Very tough to win football games with those factors. That's where I was right. Where were you right?
Well, this one was pretty easy to point out. But where I was right was in college football, with two undefeateds still being undefeated. Yes, I know, and I'm not going to go here too often. USC hasn't looked great. But what about Alabama? Call me a homer. I've never lived in Alabama. Call me a front runner. I followed Alabama since they were good, yes. But it's been 10 years now, and I will never switch my team. They're sitting pretty right now with a dominating win versus then ranked third FSU, who, yes, their season is gone. They've lost their quarterback. You cannot take that win against Alabama, though.
Absolutely not.
And now they're coming off a demolishing of Vanderbilt, 59-0. I said this in the beginning of the year that I did not think a team would be on par with the Tide. And is there a team in college football right now that looks like they can beat the Tide? I don't think so. It is looking more and more like I was wrong about my prediction about the college football championship, but that's because of a hurt quarterback. It is looking like the third coming of Alabama Clemson this January. Where were you wrong?
I hate to admit this, but my Draftkings picks for the past 2 weeks, man, I hope you were not listening to me because they were god-awful. I enter my picks into tournaments every week, and while I did great week 1 with my Sam Bradford, Stephon Diggs combo, my picks have been absolutely terrible for you in the past 2 weeks, finishing in the bottom half of all lobbies that I joined, and even the matchups where I tinkered a little bit and I put them in my friends' matchups. Absolutely awful. I am very sorry if you listen to my DraftKings picks, but this week maybe they will turn around. James, where were you wrong?
Where was I wrong? Well, this was something that I guess a lot of people saw coming. I personally didn't. I was totally wrong about the Saints. I had the Saints going 12-4 this year. I thought Drew Brees, yes, he's getting older, but the Saints know that. And they want to take advantage of him getting older and not being able to play for much longer. Quarterbacks like him don't come around. They signed Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson's never had a quarterback like Drew Brees. I thought the combination of having him back there with Drew Brees back there, you don't know where to defend. You don't know where the ball's going to go. It can go anywhere. Drew Brees looks himself this year. Yes, he still looks like Drew Brees, and now with Willie Snead back in the fold, I think he will continue to look like Drew Brees. But the Saints as a whole have looked horrendous. Their defense is the worst in the league, as it always is for the last 3 years. It is just getting worse and worse by the year, I feel like. There's nothing they can do to fix this, and I don't know why. I don't know where the Saints have gone wrong, but I thought this AP Drew Brees combination, veteran leadership, would take them a long way this year, and it just has not worked out, and I don't think AP is going to last the season on the Saints because of it. Where were you right?
My last right, I told you to pick the Jags against Baltimore in London, and I couldn't have been more on the money. Yes, I was a little hesitant, but that's because I hate picking my team in bets. I generally stay away from it, but I felt so good about it that I had to, even though I was a little hesitant. I just felt so good. I had to put money down on the Jaguars. They're used to making this trip. Baltimore has never made this trip. They're Bortles is used to it. Bortles is a beast in London, by the way. Just this little side note. Baltimore, going into that game, severely overrated, dominating two bad teams. And their offensive line going into that game was just awful. Jacksonville's defensive line is amazing, and Jacksonville exposed too many weaknesses Baltimore has. And honestly, I think Baltimore could be on a slippery slope going forward. James, where were you right?
Well, where I was right is where you were wrong in my DraftKings picks. I actually, on the other hand, did well, besides the fact that J.J. Nelson screwed me. I just want to run through my lineup really quick. I placed 447th, which doesn't sound that great, but out of 7,100 people. Not all that bad anymore. I had Alex Smith at the quarterback, if you remember, 15 points. I said Le'Veon Bell and Odell Beckham were both going to go off this week. 2.1% of people picked Odell Beckham, who scored me 28.9 with 9 receptions, 79 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns, including a dog peeing celebration. I was right about that. That was my main pick of the week for DraftKings, was having Bell and Odell in my lineup, 2 stars who took up most of my salary cap, but I knew that they would go off this week. On top of that, I had Chris Thompson, 33 points. Le'Veon Bell had 21. Odell had 28. Deshaun Jackson had 18. Yes, J.J. Nelson got me 0. But Zach Ertz got me 18.5. Kenny Stills only got me 9.1. But you can live with that. The Titans defense and J.J. Nelson would have gotten me more than 1 point combined. You're looking at me possibly in the top 100 out of 7,100 people. So I'm going to take that as a plus and a win for me this week. And I think I can say that I was right with my picks this week. But that being said, our last wrong of the week, we were both wrong about. Would you care to explain?
So I'm not going to say where we were right or where we were wrong. It's where we got screwed. Straight up screwed. The Falcons and Lions game was one of the best of the weekend. It probably should have been on Sunday night. Should have been the Sunday night game. But I was absolutely hogwashed. We were both absolutely hogwashed in that pick. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Falcons were up 30-26. Lions driving down the field as time was running out. It's almost impossible for a team to have 3 turnovers, 1 for a pick 6, and still win the game just like the Falcons had. And then it happened. The Lions scored the game winner. It was official. It actually happened. And then it didn't. And time was ran off the clock by the referees instead of allowing Detroit one more shot. I am deeply sorry if you went with that pick. We got it wrong. But you shouldn't feel bad about the pick, because I absolutely do not. I would have done it the same way 1,000 times over again if I had to do it again, if I was ever in that situation. That's where we got screwed. Don't base anything else on it. We just simply got screwed on it. Detroit should have won that game.
I'm picking Detroit to win the game if I had to pick again, not even just to cover the spread.
100%. It was absolutely ridiculous just how everything transpired. And imagine if that happened on Sunday night. Just the amount of hysteria that would have happened if that was the Sunday night game.
Chris Collinsworth would have lost his mind.
Absolutely. Now, coming up, we're talking about fantasy waiver wire pickups, and I am not backing off the Lions at all. Stay tuned to hear who we demand you pick up in your leagues yesterday.
You're listening to Between the Hash Marks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe, brought to you by an unknown sponsor we don't have yet. Now back to the show.
And welcome back here to the show on BTH. And we're going to go into our waiver wire pickup of the week. And I have a unique one this week. He has not seen the field yet this season. He got hurt before the season started. Will Fuller of the Houston Texans. He's only owned in 3% of leagues, of ESPN leagues. And because he broke his collarbone, like I said, he has not played a down yet, but he's slated to return this week. He's a great, and I mean great, deep threat for Deshaun Watson. And now he's a great opposite side receiver to DeAndre Hopkins, who's more of a possession and down type receiver. Now you have a possession and down, you have a deep threat, you do somewhat have a run game. I think that this could be good for the Texans. I think it could be good for Fuller, and Fuller was a first-round pick last year in 2016, and he didn't have that great of a year, but that's because he had so much inconsistency at quarterback. I think with Deshaun Watson being able to run the ball like he can, being the threat that he is, defenses now have to take the Texans' offense serious. With that being said, with Deshaun Watson as his quarterback, I truly think that Fuller will turn into the player that the Texans believed he would be when they drafted him in the first round, and because he's available in 97% of leagues, you should pretty much go out there and at least put him on your bench. It cannot hurt. I know I picked J.J. Nelson last week, but trust me on this, Will Fuller has a ton of potential. Who's your waiver wire pickup?
Told you I wasn't backing down from the Lions overall. The waiver wire pickup you must have this week and going forward for the rest of the season is the Lions defense. They are ranked first in ESPN standard leagues. And look, their defense isn't amazing in real football sense. They gave up over 30 points to the Falcons last week, which Falcons are one of the best offenses in the league. But they have scored in 3 straight weeks, and they have forced 8 turnovers over that time. Now, let's admit it, turnovers and especially scoring off turnovers requires a lot more luck than skill, but you have to play the hot hand. You'd be a fool not to pick them up as your starting defense, or at the very least, a defense that you stream. They are still available, in 71% of leagues, and they were added in 18.7% of leagues over the past week. So you can get out there and get the Lions defense. It is a must add, especially going against the Minnesota Vikings this week. Yes, it's on the road, but they are playing a quarterback, Case Keenum, who I think outplayed himself last week. I do not expect him to have those numbers going into this week. Get the Lions defense right now. Now moving along into one of your favorite segments of the week, it is our optimal Draftkings lineup. Now I've been pretty bad over the past 2 weeks, so you might just want to ignore me and just listen to James because he knows what he's talking about and I do not. But week 1, I'm trying to sprinkle some fairy dust that I had from week 1 and use it in week 4. I am going the Brady-Gronk combo. Yes, it's hella mad expensive, but they are the closest thing to a sure thing, and the connection is going to happen at least one time. Yes, Gronk has that potential of getting hurt, but it is worth the 6.6K risk because he is better than receivers that are at that price. This could potentially be the breakout game for Gronk, though, with multiple scores against a Carolina team that is going to struggle to keep its defense off of the field because that offense is just so bad. Running backs, I'm going cheap this week with them, and you should too. There is some decent value out there. Mark Ingram is 5K, and I expect New Orleans to put up big numbers in London against a very tired Dolphins team. Tevin Coleman, 4.6K. Look, I like Devonta Freeman a lot more, obviously, but he's too damn expensive. If you can fit him into your lineup, he's almost a sure thing as well. But Coleman is a very nice flex play and definitely has the possibility of having that big play, that monstrous play that just rakes up the fantasy numbers. Wide receivers, I'm going sneaky but steady. I have Pierre Garçon, Sammy Watkins, Emmanuel Sanders, and Rashard Matthews. Let's go one by one here. Pierre Garçon is going up against a tough secondary, yes, but they're actually rated 27th going into week 4. He is the clear number 1 in San Fran, and that connection between him and Hoyer seems to be doing very well, especially watching last week's Thursday night game. Sammy Watkins, another player who had an amazing Thursday night game in that Thursday night shootout. The Rams are scoring points like crazy at an even higher rate than the greatest show on turf through 3 weeks. Much of that has to do with Gurley, but Gurley is able to have that success because Goff is more comfortable in the pocket and he finally has weapons and he's using them, like Sammy Watkins. Not to mention, the Dallas defense has one of the worst secondaries in the league, and they have some minor injuries that could be really detrimental to them. 3. I love Emmanuel Sanders for 6.1K here, going against Oakland. Oakland was exposed last week for having a weak secondary against a Redskins team who I don't think has a great offense, but Cousins has those ability to have those big games. But don't let that Oakland 6th rating against wide receivers fool you. A lot of that is because Oakland played the Jets and they really contained Tennessee. But Oakland's secondary is quite suspect despite their success, and that's going back to last year. And Rashard Matthews, he's also very cheap, $4.9K. And that is a pick that I'm leaning on. I don't absolutely love it, but he's cheap. And Tennessee looks to be getting their offense rolling. They were very impressive in their last 2 wins against Seattle and completely demolishing Jacksonville. And they're a couple of plays away from being the team we're all talking about instead of Kansas City. Yes, they run the ball a lot, but Matthews gets the targets, and Matthews has had success against the Texans, raking up 196 yards and a touchdown on 11 catches in 2 games last year. And Matthews had 6 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown last week, including a 55-yard career long. Going with the defense, do not blow it on Jacksonville, because trust me, it's not worth it. The Jaguars fan is telling you, don't blow it on Jacksonville. In Seattle, it's a good pickup, but it could be very, very suspect. I expect the Atlanta Falcons to control most of the game against Buffalo. Now, Buffalo is a very interesting team, the quietest 2-1 team in this league, but Buffalo will not be putting up big numbers at all, and I could see Tyrod Taylor getting into awkward situations that makes him throw the ball that could lead to an Atlanta score. Go with the Falcons defense. James, what is your Draftkings?
Well, I gotta say, I love your Emmanuel Sanders pick. That's the one coincidental that we do have for 6,100. I'm going to start off with that because I wanted to add to that. Something that you should take into consideration when you're going to draft Emmanuel Sanders is that he saw 15 targets last Sunday. 15! And he has 13 receptions over the last 2 weeks. He's got 24 fantasy points 2 weeks ago and 14 last week, but that's because he did not get in the end zone. He still had 7 receptions for 75 yards. And you know what? Emmanuel Sanders is a must play this week. But starting off with my quarterback now, I'm going to go with the quarterback combination, wide receiver, that not a lot of people will probably go with. But Jay Cutler, Devontae Parker. I know it sounds crazy. Jay Cutler just had a horrible week against a Jets defense that's supposed to be horrendous. Yes, the Jets defense is horrendous, but you're forgetting about Jamal Adams, who's going to be the best safety in the league one day, and it's coming up soon, and he had a hell of a game for the Jets secondary. And not to mention, the Jets still have a top 5 defensive line. When you are getting pressure to the quarterback, you can't help that. Jay Cutler is now not going up against a defensive line like that and is going up against this horrendous Saints defense. Expect him to have a big game as well as Devontae Parker. Running backs, LaShawn McCoy and James White. This is PPR. I think that the Patriots go back and forth with their running backs. 1 week it's White, 1 week it's Lewis. 1 week it's White, 1 week it's Lewis. Last week was Lewis, this week is going to be White. Expect him to have a big game with catches. He may not see the end zone. He is a tricky play this week, but I think he's worth it for 5,000. LaShawn McCoy, 8,400. Yes, he is expensive, and he has not performed up to date, but he is going up against the Falcons defense, who is ranked 30th against the run this year. Not to mention, they just lost one of their best pass rushers and defensive linemen in Vic Beasley. LaShawn McCoy, this is going to be the week that he breaks out, if he's going to break out of this slump that he's in. I already mentioned Devontae Parker, 6,700. He is not all that expensive for a wide receiver. He's averaging 17.1 fantasy points a game. He's going up against the 28th opponent ranking in the Saints against wide receivers this year. But Devontae Parker and Jay Cutler are just starting to get on the same page. I expect them to have a big week this week in London. He is worth the risk. Sterling Shepard. Yes, I know he's the 3rd receiver behind Odell and behind Brandon Marshall, but he's their slot receiver. He actually saw 10 targets last week, and yes, most of his yardage came on a huge touchdown that went for 77 yards. He did have a big game other than that touchdown. Sterling Shepard is also a tricky play. I base my teams around a lot of hope and what ifs, but if these pan out, I promise you, you will be winning big. Delaney Walker, he's going up against the Houston Texans. Yes, the Texans have a great defense, and I think the Texans will probably end up winning this game. But they're missing a key piece to their defense in their middle linebacker, Brian Cushing, and who else covers tight ends but the middle linebackers? I think Delanie Walker is bound to have a breakout game, and he's going to put up 20-plus points this year, or 20-plus points this week. I'm expecting in the 25 to 28 range. I think he's going to have a 10-catch performance with at least 100 yards and a touchdown. Go with Delanie Walker. I think he is the tight end to play this week. And for my flex, Chris Carson of the Seahawks. He had his biggest game as a pro last week. He is only 5,400, and he's going up against the Colts. I think with the fact that Seattle is kind of they're in shambles on their offense right now. They don't look the same. I think they are going to look to get the running game started. If they can get the running game going, it will get Russell Wilson going. It will get Jimmy Graham and Doug Baldwin going. Everything kind of relies right now on their horrible O-line, but Chris Carson coming out and continuing to put up fantasy points. The Colts are ranked 18th against the rush this year, and Chris Carson in Seattle, mind you, will have a big game on Sunday night in prime time and show everybody that Chris Carson is here to stay. And I think you should have taken your own advice. But my defense, the Detroit Lions, against the Minnesota Vikings at 2,700. They're averaging 15 points per game as a defense. That is unheard of. Let's see. I'm going to go up my lineup right now. Jay Cutler is averaging less. James White is averaging less. Devontae Parker is averaging just over. Emmanuel Sanders is averaging less. Sterling Shepard is averaging 15 points a game. Delanie Walker at 12 and Chris Carson at 10. The Lions defense is averaging more points per game than these studs that are on my lineup this week. Trust me, if you can take this lineup and put it into Draftkings, I guarantee you're going to at least double your money. Speaking of the Lions defense, though, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to go into our pick'ems now for the week against the spread. Last week, Sean and I both went 2-3, and we both would have went 3-2 if it weren't for the refs screwing us in that Lions-Falcons game. On the year, Sean is 6-4, I am 5-5, and this week, I'm going to start my picks off with the Vikings at -2 over the Lions. I'm taking the Lions at +2 there. I'm going to go with the Lions in back-to-back weeks. I don't see how the Lions could be an underdog against the Vikings in Minnesota with Case Keenum at the quarterback. I don't see it. The Lions are a must-pick this week again. Steelers are a favorite over Baltimore at -3. It's in Baltimore, yes. These games are always tough, yes. But the Steelers just lost to the Bears. If you don't think that they're going to come out and want to put the spanking on the Baltimore Ravens, you got another thing coming. I'm going Steelers -3 at Baltimore. Jaguars -3 over the New York Jets. Yes, I'm going to take the Jaguars here. I think that the Jets had a fluke week last week. They have a up-and-coming defense that will take a couple years. But the Jaguars seem to have taken that next step in their developmental process of their team, and they seem to be on the right track again, and they look good this year, and they just crushed a Baltimore team that was 2-0 on the year and had only let up 10 points on the year and went into that game and let up 44. I'm taking the Jaguars. They look good all around over the Jets at -3. I'm taking the Chiefs at -7 in Kansas City over Washington. This pick is a no-brainer to me. I think Washington, yes, they looked good against Oakland, but we just mentioned this before, teams going from west to east. I don't care what time they're playing. It affects them slightly. And the Raiders did not look good, and Washington did. But now you're going into the place that holds the record for the loudest stadium, and you're playing against a team that, in my opinion, as we speak, is the number 1 power ranking going into week 4 at 3-0. And I don't think you can pick against the Chiefs this week. I think even with a 7-point spread, they're going to win by at least 10. Last but not least, this should not shock you. Chargers home, 1.5 favorites over the Eagles. I'm going to take the Eagles here because I think the Chargers are going to lose as many close games as possible. And there's not much I'm going to say about this. This is going to be a tough game one way or another. The Eagles are traveling to the West Coast, which will be a little difficult, but I do think that they will pull out the victory, and the Chargers will go to 0-4. Who are your picks for this week?
So, as James said, we both got BS from going 3-2 last week. First week under 500. I'm 10-5 against the spread. starting back to week 1, 6-4 against James. James 5-5 against me. Now I want to say this is very good for somebody who's doing this for the first time. We're both doing it for the first time, taking it very seriously. About 54% is at the professional level, so we both deserve some credit here. But here is my picks of the week. I love these Sunday morning games. They create a lot of variables that make things easy to pick out. The Saints are -3 going against the Dolphins in London. Saints offense is finally coming together, and the Dolphins looked clueless against the Jets last week. They are extremely tired. Look, they had an extended training camp in California because of Hurricane Irma. They were out in California, which helped them prepare for the Chargers. This was a good thing. This is the reason why I had the Dolphins against the Chargers in my pick in week 2. Then they came back home, had to deal with hurricane cleanup. Then they went to New York, got clobbered by the Jets. And then I'm not sure if they went back to Miami or they went straight to London, but it's bad either way. Very, very tired team, and Adam Gase is talking about benching guys for not trying. That is a huge red flag in my opinion. Players are not buying into the system. Another huge red flag. Give me the Saints, swallow the points. The Rams are 7-point dogs on the road facing Dallas. And look, Dallas may be one of the best teams in the NFL right now, but the Rams are coming off an extended rest, playing that Thursday night game, and the Cowboys secondary is terrible. And I'm not completely buying into Goff. I'm not saying he's the savior yet, but boy, has he looked good this season. The Rams are the highest scoring team in the NFL right now. This game is going to be very, very high scoring. Dallas will win, but it will be a lot closer than many people think. I am leaning towards the Rams on +7. The Giants are getting 3 points on the road down in Tampa. Look, I know the Giants don't have an offensive line. It's absolutely atrocious. But the Tampa defense is banged up. And usually teams that are 0-3 do very, very well against the spread. Give me the Giants to win this one outright, pull off the upset, and especially cover that 3-point
Taking
spread.
the Giants,
Taking
huh?
the Giants, yeah.
Okay.
I slammed them earlier in the show. I'm taking them today.
Okay.
The Broncos, they are a 3-point favorite against the Raiders. The Raiders are the public's favorite team. Here's a little fun fact for you. They were the most bet team by the public every single week this year. So week 1 against the Titans, the public loved the Raiders. More bets on the Raiders than any other team. Week 2, when they played the Jets, more bets on the Raiders than any other team. And week 3, more bets on the Raiders against the Redskins than any other team. So this is creating amazing value for contrary bettors, and I love to be the contrary bettor because I think there's a lot of value out there in doing so. Oakland's defense, especially their secondary, is bottom tier in the league. Did we forget that their defense is really bad? I don't understand why we're saying that they're really good. Their defense is awful. Simeon is really good at home, and so is that defense, especially in Denver. Give me the Broncos, swallow the points. Now, I absolutely hate picking this many favorites. I have two favorites, and I'm about to have another one right here. But this Monday night matchup is just too damn juicy. James, we both agree on this one. Kansas City -7 favorite against Washington. I'm taking Kansas City and swallowing the points. Washington is coming off of a big Sunday night win as a home dog. Super emotional, and I hate those teams that are going on the road after a prime time win. Super emotional where they were the huge underdog. They're not going to be as motivated in this game as they were for the previous week. Not to mention, this could be a game where Cousins gets into a lot of trouble. It's very loud in Kansas City, one of the top 2 or 3 venues in the National Football League, if not number 1.
I believe it broke Seattle's record for the sound.
It did. No, it did. And Kansas City, they love their Chiefs. They're going to be roaring in Kansas City. Give me the Chiefs -7. Now, coming up next week, hear our reaction to the weekend, my opening rant, and we're going to give you our first quarter of the season power rankings. Remember to like us and listen to us on Facebook, YouTube, and iTunes. Email us at bthashmarks@gmail.com. Have an amazing week 4. Win that money. Dominate your league. You're listening to Between the Hash Marks.